Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the fascinating world of Norse mythology. So get ready to learn all about the gods, the giants, and the monsters that inhabited the 9 realms of the Norse pantheon. We'll be covering a lot of ground in this video, so let's just jump right in. We'll start by exploring the creation of the universe, according to Norse mythology. Then we'll move on to the various pantheons of the Norse gods, including the Aesir, the Vanir, and the giants. We'll also talk about the prophecy of Ragnarok and the death of Balder. And we'll explore some of the most famous figures in Norse mythology, like Odin, Thor, and Loki. So if you're ready to learn all about Norse mythology, then stay tuned because it's going to be one hell of a ride. Let's go. When Ragnarok comes, the final battle of Norse mythology, it won't just be gods who clash. It's monsters who will rise from shadow and fire. And today, we're counting down 5 terrifying Norse monsters born from Ragnarok. These beasts are the nightmares of the Viking imagination, destined to shake the world. So join us as we delve into the chilling tales of these creatures who awaken during the twilight of the gods. Number 5. Surtur, the fire giant with the flaming sword. Imagine a giant emerging from the south, his skin as black as pitch, eyes blazing with infernal light. That's Surtur, a monster prophesied to rise when Ragnarok's fires ignite. His sword, aptly named Flamma, bursts with flames that snuff out the stars. In Norse tales, giants aren't just big. They're embodiments of natural forces. And Surtur embodies fire and destruction. He stands at the edge of Muspelheim, a fiery realm, ready to plunge the cosmos into chaos. But what makes Surtur truly terrifying is his connection to the end of days. The poetic Edda, an old Norse manuscript, tells us that he awakens, brandishing his flaming sword, signaling the start of Ragnarok. As the giants engage in a fierce battle with the gods, Surtur sets the world ablaze, leaving only death and destruction in his wake. So if you find yourself in the midst of Ragnarok and see a giant approaching with a sword that devours the night sky, you know it's Surtur. And once he ignites his blade, there's no hope for survival. Number 4. Jormungandr, the world serpent. Picture a serpent so massive it circles the globe, its scales harder than mountains, its eyes burning with primordial rage. This is Jormungandr, the embodiment of chaos, whose anger will unleash earthquakes that shatter the earth. In Norse mythology, Jormungandr is no ordinary serpent. He's the son of Loki and the giantess Angerboda, and because of his monstrous nature, Odin, the god of wisdom, banished him to the ocean depths. But as the prophecy foretold, Jormungandr grew, not just in size, but in power. He became the guardian of the depths, coiling around the earth, Midgard, and keeping it safe from the giants of yore. Yet during Ragnarok, this protective instinct turns into destructive fury. As Surtur unleashes his flaming sword, Jormungandr rises, shaking the world with his wrath. The ground trembles as he slithers across the land, causing earthquakes that swallow men and mountains alike. Even the gods can't escape his wrath. In the epic poem Voluspa, Hassel Strandar, we see how Jormungandr's poisonous blood drips onto the ground, poisoning all in its path. It's a grim reminder of the chaos he embodies, a force of nature unleashed, leaving nothing but devastation in his wake. Number 3. Fenrir, the wolf who devours Odin. Envision a wolf, not just any wolf, but one large enough to encircle the whole earth, its eyes glowing with a cold fire, symbolizing the unforgiving chill of death. That's Fenrir, a creature of pure nightmare, destined to emerge during Ragnarok. In Norse mythology, Fenrir wasn't just a fearsome beast. He was a companion to Odin, the god of wisdom, learning, and poetry, a stark contrast to the wolf's ferocious nature. Yet this didn't diminish Fenrir's power or danger. Odin recognized this, knowing that when Ragnarok came, Fenrir would turn against him. Despite this knowledge, Odin kept his word. training Fenrir, teaching him the ways of the gods. But as the time of the great battle neared, Odin knew the inevitable. He foresaw that Fenrir's true power lay dormant, and he had to be unleashed. So as the twilight of the gods approached, Odin made the difficult decision to banish Fenrir away. Alone and far from the warmth of Asgard, Fenrir felt the pull of his wild instincts grow stronger. Then news of Ragnarok reached him, and he knew his moment had come. With a deafening roar, Fenrir returned, his eyes blazing with a cold fire, a symbol of death's icy grip. He joined the fray, his jaws tearing through the ranks of gods and giants alike. In the end, Fenrir's hunger for battle was so intense that he even turned against his former master, Odin, devouring the god and adding his name to the list of Ragnarok's victims. 2. Hel, the queen of the dead. Now picture a queen, not of gold and jewels, but of shadows and silence. Her realm is not in the heavens, but in the underworld, Hel, the personification of death, where souls go after their mortal journey ends. In Norse mythology, Hel's story is a tale of duality. She's the daughter of Loki, a trickster god, and the giantess Angerboda, yet she rules her domain with fairness. She welcomes those who die of sickness and old age, offering them peace and rest. But when warriors perish in battle, their souls are sent to the brave hall of Folkvang, where the goddess Freya chooses those worthy of Valhalla, the home of fallen heroes. However, Hel's role becomes terrifying during Ragnarok. As the gods and giants clash, death claims more souls than usual. The slain warriors who might have gone to Folkvang are instead taken by Hel, adding to her power. Yet her domain doesn't stay peaceful for long. Surtur's fires reach even the underworld, forcing Hel to flee. As she journeys through the realms, the heat melts the barriers between the living and the dead, releasing spirits that wreak havoc wherever they go. It's a chilling spectacle, a procession of restless souls, a harbinger of Ragnarok's complete devastation. Number 1, Nidhöggr, the corpse-eating dragon. Imagine a dragon not soaring majestically through the skies, but slithering along the ground, lapping up the blood of the slain. This is Nidhöggr, a creature embodying decay and despair, whose very presence accelerates the corruption of corpses. In Norse mythology, Nidhöggr is the epitome of a scavenger, always close behind the battlefield, waiting for the carnage to end so he can feast on the dead. His favorite hunting ground is the ground beneath the great ash tree Yggdrasil, the cosmic axis that connects the 9 realms. Here, Nidhöggr feasts on the corpses of warriors, both good and evil, gorging himself on the essence of their mortality. His hunger is insatiable, and he grows larger and more powerful with each meal. But during Ragnarok, Nidhöggr becomes a sinister omen. As the battle rages, he senses the imminence of death and the promise of a bountiful feast. He descends onto the battlefield, not to fight, but to feed, lapping up the blood of the dying. The sight of this dragon feasting on the carnage adds another layer of horror to the already gruesome battle. As the gods fall one by one, Nidhöggr's eyes gleam with anticipation. The approach of Ragnarok means an endless supply of fresh corpses, and he couldn't be happier. In the tapestry of Norse mythology, these monsters aren't just terrifying tales. They're reflections of the human experience, our fears of the unknown, the darkness within us, and the inevitability of death. As we bring this journey to a close, we're left with a haunting image of the world as seen through their eyes. A world where giants lurk in the shadows, serpents guard the earth, wolves prowl the skies, and dragons feast on the dead. It's a chilling reminder that in the grand narrative of existence, we're all part of a much larger, sometimes terrifying story. But the stories don't end here. They live on in the echoes of our memories and the whispers of our tales. So until next time, keep an eye on the horizon for giants, listen closely for the serpent's whispers, and watch your step, for you never know when a corpse-eating dragon might be lurking nearby. Remember, history isn't just in the past. It's alive in the stories we choose to remember. If you enjoyed this journey back to the time of the Vikings, hit the like button and leave a comment with the legend you'd want to see next. Subscribe so you never miss the next chapter of the past. Who is Loki? That's a question that should be easy to answer. After all, Loki has been one of the most popular villains in Marvel Studios' recent slate of films, starring the one and only Tom Hiddleston. And while Loki may have made a grand entrance into the modern pantheon with his very own series on Disney+, that wasn't where he came from. No, Loki comes from an older tradition of tales known as Norse paganism or heathenry. In fact, Loki is such a popular figure in the Norse myths that we have an overwhelming amount of stories featuring him. And the more we look at them, the more we can see just how complex this character really is. So join us as we count down 5 dark things about Loki that you didn't know. Number 5, Loki was a blood brother to Odin, not just a villain. Now, if you're familiar with Marvel Comics, then it's probably pretty easy to assume that Loki was always destined to become a villain. After all, he was born a frost giant, a sworn enemy of the Aesir, the race of gods that Loki eventually joined. In fact, Loki's mother, the giantess Angerboda, was literally the reason that his father, the equally giant Farbauti, started a war with the Aesir. See, Odin and his brothers slew their way through the frost giants, but when they got to Angerboda, he had her trapped in a magic bag and used his powers to turn her into a mare. When Farbauti tracked her down and demanded she come back with him, Odin intervened and made a proposition, one that would change the course of history forever. Odin offered to take Loki in as his foster son, raising him as one of the Aesir and giving him the title of the God of Mischief. But that came with one catch. To cement the bargain between them, Odin and Loki had to swear a blood oath. And you don't get much closer than that. The problem is that blood oaths were binding, and when Loki went back on his word, Odin was left with no choice but to enact their agreement. Yeah, Loki might be the god of lies, but he's also the god of honor. And Odin would soon learn that those two aren't always mutually exclusive. Number 4, he fathered monsters and a horse. Loki is probably best remembered as the father of monsters. We're talking about creatures like the Midgard serpent, the wolf Fenrir, and the terrifyingly beautiful goddess of death, Hela. In fact, all 3 of these children are the literal embodiments of doom and destruction. So who exactly was their mother? Well, the truth is that Loki sired children with many different lovers, some of whom were actually gods themselves. One of his most well-known affairs was with the goddess Sigyn, who he met while disguised as the god of wisdom, Kvasir. Their union bore him Narfi, who we already mentioned, as well as the monstrous serpent Jormungandr. But Loki didn't just make babies with deities. Oh no, he wooed mortals too. Remember that whole god of fire thing we mentioned? Well, he ended up setting his sights on a mortal woman named Thor. And although their affair only lasted 3 nights, their union resulted in a new god, the trickster deity Bylist. And yes, we know it looks like he's producing children at a disturbing rate, but we assure you that it gets worse. There's also Sleipnir, Loki's 8-legged horse, which he brought into the world by seducing a giantess named Gunnelhide. So yeah, that happened. Number 3, his tricks often saved the gods, until they didn't. Loki might be a liar and a trickster, but throughout the various Norse myths, he often did the gods a favor. From helping Heimdall track down the legendary mead of poetry, to securing the release of Thor and his companions from the giantess Thrym, Loki consistently bails the other gods out of danger, and while he does demand compensation for his services, said compensation could be as simple as the promise of a night of entertainment. Unfortunately for Loki, though, the gods would eventually repay his kindnesses in kind and invite him to attend the funeral of Balder the Beautiful, something which Loki would immediately regret. As it turns out, one of Loki's tricks saved the entire Norse pantheon. While visiting the blind god Hodor, Loki made a bet that he could get the god to shoot an arrow at him without doing any damage. Obviously, Loki felt invincible, so he volunteered to be the target. But when Hodor fired, his arrow struck true, killing Loki and releasing all of the serpents he was keeping chained. Under his skin, naturally, the other gods were furious. And even though Loki tried to make amends, claiming that he could be resurrected, they refused to listen. Instead, they strung him up to a nearby tree and began to flay him. And you know what? It gets worse. Before they let him go, they put him on trial and forced him to swear an oath that he'd never do anything to harm them ever again. Naturally, Loki broke that oath the second he was free. And that brings us to our next point. 2. He will lead the armies of Ragnarok. Okay, so maybe we should dial back on the whole "he often saved the gods" thing. See, while Loki did perform heroic deeds, he also did a lot of harmful things, like kill Balder. In fact, he spent a great deal of time stirring up conflict, usually because he was bored. After all, what else is a god of trickery supposed to do? Well, unfortunately for everyone, he eventually found an outlet for his restless energy, a prophecy that foretold the end of the world. Known as Ragnarok, the event would bring about the death of most of the major gods, and Loki would lead the opposing army, consisting of giants, demons, undead warriors, and of course, his own children, all against the surviving Aesir, who would be led by Thor. If that sounds insane, that's because it is. But according to the Eddas, Loki is destined to do it. In fact, if there's anyone who's excited for Ragnarok, it's Loki. After all, it gives him a chance to break free from the shackles that bind him. More on that in a minute. And now, before we reveal the darkest truth of all, we want to give you a chance to show off your knowledge of Norse mythology. Test your skills with our quiz. Noma 1, he's bound in pain until the end of the world. For those of you who might not be aware, Loki wasn't just flayed once. In fact, the gods did that to him twice. And after the second time, they decided to add some extra punishment. They tied him up with chains, bound him to a rock, and threw him into a cave guarded by venomous snakes. And why, you ask? Well, Loki was getting a little bit too powerful, thanks to his shape-shifting abilities. In fact, he became so powerful that Odin couldn't even see him anymore. Something had to be done. And since punishing him was their favorite pastime, they decided to throw him in jail. Yeah, it sounds awful. And it gets worse. Once he settled in, the gods turned him into a fly so that he could suffer for eternity. But Loki being Loki, he escaped and returned to his old ways. But hey, karma's a real thing, am I right? Sure enough, when Ragnarok arrives, the giant serpent Jormungand will find Loki and bite him on the neck. And if you thought being stung by a venomous snake was painful, try being bitten by a giant serpent that circles the entire earth. In fact, the venom is so powerful that it kills Loki instantly, except for a small problem. Since he's bound to the rock, his body inflates until his veins burst and the blood pours out, resulting in the death of all life on Earth. Ironic. Hey, thanks for watching, everyone. Which dark secret surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. All-Father, Lord of Wisdom, Master of Magic, God of Poetry, King of the Aesir, Odin needs no introduction. In all of Norse mythology, no god looms larger or inspires more awe and respect from both mortals and deities alike. So who could possibly hate such a revered figure? Well, actually quite a few. Odin has his share of enemies, but that doesn't mean he's perfect. Far from it. Even gods have their dirty little secrets. And in today's episode, we are going to uncover 5 dark secrets of Odin the All-Father. Before we get into it, please subscribe for more. Also, be sure to stick around until the end of the video if you want to hear about Odin's doomed son, the ill-fated Balder. You won't want to miss this one. All right, let's dive right in. Number 5, he gave his eye for cosmic knowledge. Odin is known as the god of wisdom. It is said that his wisdom is unparalleled in all of the 9 worlds. But how does one acquire knowledge on such a grand scale? Through study alone? Perhaps not in Odin's case. In fact, Odin traded something very precious for his vast knowledge of magic, poetry, and runes. Yggdrasil, the world tree, connects the 9 worlds and is guarded by the Norns, 3 powerful sisters who control the fate of all living things. Odin desired to know the fates of all beings, including the future of his own people. So he journeyed to the roots of Yggdrasil, where the Norns reside, and offered them a bargain. Odin would trade one of his eyes for the gift of cosmic knowledge. The Norns agreed, and so Odin gave up one of his eyes, plunging him into darkness, and in exchange, received the wisdom and knowledge he desired. This story shows us that even the most powerful of gods must make sacrifices to gain knowledge. It also shows us Odin's insatiable thirst for wisdom and his willingness to do whatever it takes to get what he wants. Number 4, he hung himself on the world tree for 9 days. If you are familiar with the Christian Bible, then you may remember the story of Jesus Christ being crucified on the cross. It is one of the most well-known stories in all of human history. However, Odin has a similar tale of his own, except Odin didn't rise from the dead after 3 days, and he wasn't betrayed by one of his closest friends. No, Odin was suspended on the world tree for 9 whole days, and he was ready to give up his life for the greater good. Once upon a time, Odin desired to learn the secrets of the runes, which were said to hold great power over the fate of men. So he journeyed to the top of Yggdrasil and hung himself on its branches for 9 nights. During his time hanging on the tree, Odin experienced many visions and revelations, and he learned the secrets of the runes. However, his ordeal did not end there. After 9 nights, Odin was taken by the giants and thrown down from the world tree. But Odin survived the fall and returned home. To his people, this story reveals another side of Odin, a side that is willing to endure great suffering for the sake of knowledge. It also shows us Odin's connection to the world tree, which is a symbol of life and death in Norse mythology. Finally, the story shows us that Odin is not only a god of wisdom, but also a god of perseverance and resilience. Number 3, he commands the Valkyries and the slain. As we mentioned earlier, Odin is a god of war, and with any war comes death. And when someone dies in battle, they don't just disappear. In Norse mythology, the slain warriors are brought to a place called Folkvang, where they feast and fight in a hall ruled by the goddess Freya. On the other hand, those who die in battle are brought to a place called Valhalla, where they are welcomed by the god of war and his band of female warrior figures known as Valkyries. These Valkyries are responsible for guiding the souls of the slain to Valhalla, where they prepare for the final battle of Ragnarok. Some Valkyries are Odin's daughters, while others are servants of his. Valkyries have the ability to choose which warriors will live and which will die in battle. And they are often depicted as wild and fierce, bearing both shield and spear. The Valkyries are a reminder of the importance of courage and honor in battle. They are also a reminder that death is not the end, but merely a transition to another realm. Number 2, he practices forbidden cider magic. Odin isn't just a god of war and wisdom, he is also a god of magic. And not just any kind of magic, but the most powerful and forbidden type of magic in Norse mythology, cider. Cider is an Old Norse word that refers to a type of magic that was practiced by both male and female practitioners. However, it was mostly associated with women who were known as Völuspá. Völuspá were typically older women who were respected for their knowledge and experience in the practice of cider. They were said to be able to perform a wide range of magical feats, including healing, divination, and even controlling the weather. But despite its power, cider was considered a dangerous and risky practice, and those who practiced it were often feared and ostracized by society. In fact, the practice of cider was banned in some places, and those who were caught practicing it were often persecuted and even put to death. So why did Odin practice such a dangerous form of magic? The answer is simple: power. Cider is a powerful form of magic, and Odin, being the god of wisdom and magic, would obviously want to learn and practice all forms of it, no matter how dangerous or forbidden they may be. In fact, it is said that Odin learned cider from the Vanir, a group of gods associated with fertility and nature. He then brought this knowledge back to the Aesir, the other group of gods in Norse mythology, and taught them the ways of cider. This exchange of knowledge between the two groups of gods led to a truce between them, ending a long-standing feud. So not only did Odin practice cider magic for the sake of power, but he also used it to bring peace between his people and the Vanir. Number 1. He's destined to be devoured by Fenrir. We have already mentioned a few of Odin's children, like Thor and Balder, but one child stands out above the rest. Literally. Meet Fenrir, Odin's giant wolf son. In Norse mythology, Fenrir is one of the 3 children of Odin and the giantess Gangur, along with a wolf named Geri and a dog named Freki. Now Odin loved all of his children, but he had a soft spot for Fenrir, who grew to be an enormous wolf, so big that he couldn't even fit inside of Odin's halls. So Odin took Fenrir to the dwarves and had them make a magical belt and collar for him, which would allow Odin to control the beast. But even with the magical restraints, Fenrir continued to grow until he was so big that Odin knew he would have to sacrifice him in order to save his people. On the day of the sacrifice, Odin summoned all of the gods and told them of his difficult decision. They all stood by as Odin strapped the magical collar around Fenrir's neck and prepared to throw him into the flames. But before Odin could carry out the sacrifice, Fenrir bit him on the shoulder, plunging the All-Father into darkness. And so Odin kept his promise and threw Fenrir into the flames, where they were both consumed by the fire together. This tragic tale shows us the lengths to which Odin was willing to go in order to protect his people. It also shows us the bond between father and son, as well as the power of fate and prophecy. And now for a quick reminder, subscribe for more. Also, here's an extra little tidbit about Odin that didn't make it into the main video. Do you ever feel like you're not smart enough or wise enough? Well, Odin might be able to help you with that. Did you know that Odin is also known as the god of poetry? That's right. In Norse mythology, Odin was also the patron deity of poets and bards. He was said to be the one who bestowed the gift of poetry upon humans and was often called upon by poets to help them in their craft. Odin was also the leader of a group of poets called the Skjalda, and he was said to be the author of several poems himself. So if you're feeling uninspired or stuck in your own writing, maybe it's time to call on Odin for a little help. Just be sure to thank him properly. After all, he is the All-Father. Now it's time to hear about one of Odin's most tragic losses, the death of his son, Balder. To find out what happened and to uncover the secrets of Balder's death, click the link on screen now. And if you like this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button below to let us know you approve. Thanks for watching. He's the hammer wielder, the Stormbringer, the protector of gods and men. But the real Thor was far more brutal. Welcome to my channel. And today we're counting down the top 5 most brutal facts about Thor, the thunder god. 5. He once killed giants by the dozen in a single night. Of all the figures in Norse mythology, Thor is perhaps the most beloved. A god of thunder with a heart of gold, he defended the innocent and battled evil wherever he found it. But sometimes battling evil meant getting down and dirty. During one particularly eventful night, Thor went to a party hosted by King Hrym, who had gotten himself kidnapped by a bunch of giants. In disguise as one of the servants, Thor made quick work of the giants, killing 12 of them with his hammer and sending the rest fleeing. Number 4. His chariot was pulled by goats he ate and resurrected. To say Thor loved goats would be an understatement. In fact, he once ate 2 of his own goats only to resurrect them so that he could sacrifice them to a troll and pass as a human. But what if you were the goat? Well, then you'd probably be asking yourself why you were being sacrificed to a smelly rock. Well, that's what happened to 2 of Thor's goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjost, whose names translate to tooth grinder. They were immortal, but they got eaten anyway. Or at least they looked that way. In actuality, Thor ate their corpses after making them into delicious goat stew. Don't ask us how he kept track. Nope, 3. He battled the Midgard serpent in a fight that shook the earth. The Midgard serpent was the child of Loki, a creature destined to grow so large that it would encircle the entire earth. And when it did, it would bring about the end of the world. So naturally, Thor felt it was his duty to kill the beast before it grew up. Unfortunately, as children go, the Midgard serpent was strong enough to put up a pretty good fight against the god of thunder. As the two circled each other, the serpent spit venom that turned to stone anyone who touched it. But Thor was able to dodge its attacks while striking blows of his own. But neither fighter was able to land a fatal blow, and they soon agreed to call it a draw. Thor might have won the battle, but the serpent was still out there, growing stronger until it was big enough to take him on again. This time, though, things wouldn't end in a tie. 2. His strength alone could destroy mountains. Even without Mjolnir, Thor was one of the strongest beings in all of Norse mythology. In fact, during a friendly competition with the Utgard giant, he accidentally destroyed an entire mountain range simply by trying to lift it. The god of thunder was not only super strong, he was also super dense. We don't mean that figuratively either. According to Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, Thor actually has a density of 7 times that of normal humans, which is why he could destroy mountains with his bare hands. That must have been quite a shock to the people of Utgard. They didn't know Thor was just an average Joe. Yeah, the whole God of Thunder thing threw them off. We wonder if they asked for a refund. Number 1. He's destined to die in Ragnarok and still wins. Let's face it, no one wants to die. Even if you get to go out in a blaze of glory and save the world from certain doom, that's still technically dying. For some people, this fear of death can be debilitating. But not for Thor. In fact, Thor is one of the few people out there who willingly court death. And we do mean people because Thor isn't exactly thrilled about his role in the Norse apocalypse Ragnarok. You see, he knows that when the time comes, he'll have to battle and die at the hands of the Midgard serpent. Despite knowing this, he doesn't hesitate when the time comes, proving that he's willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good. So what if he dies? Who cares? He gets to come back. Again, that's kind of the point of Norse mythology. After all, everyone dies and comes back. As a god of thunder, Thor was always eager to answer the call of those in need. From protecting the people of Asgard to defending the realm from harm, he was always ready to lend a hand or throw his hammer, literally. But it wasn't all mead and honey for the god of thunder. In fact, Thor had his fair share of enemies, both big and small. In today's video, we're going to explore the world of Norse mythology and uncover the truth behind 5 of Thor's greatest rivals. Starting off our countdown at number 5, we have Loki. Loki might have been one of the most complex figures in Norse mythology, but there's no denying that he was also one of Thor's greatest rivals. In many ways, Loki was like a brother to Thor, albeit a bit of a weird one. Despite this, Loki couldn't help but delight in tormenting Thor and often tricked him into embarrassing situations. Remember the time Thor got tied up by a group of giants and Loki showed up to mock him instead of helping him out? Yeah, classic Loki. But their rivalry wasn't all fun and games. In fact, it often bordered on deadly. Loki even slandered Thor's wife Sif just to get under his skin. When Thor threatened to kill him, Loki responded by calling him a coward. Talk about pushing it too far. Next up at number 4, we have the Utgard giants. While Loki might have been Thor's greatest enemy, the god of thunder also had a bone to pick with the Utgard giants. During one of his travels, Thor stumbled upon a group of giants who challenged him to a series of competitions. Now, Thor was always up for a challenge, but these giants were unlike any he had ever faced before. They were incredibly strong and skilled, and they pushed Thor to his limits. But Thor wasn't the only one who came out of this encounter with a black eye. In fact, he was actually tricked into making a fool of himself. At the end of the day, Thor might have won the overall competition, but he certainly didn't come out unscathed. Now we're starting to enter dangerous territory as we approach the top 3, which means the competition is going to get fierce. So stay tuned as we continue. Coming in at number 3, we have the Jormungandr. If there was one creature that had it out for Thor, it was the Jormungandr, also known as the Midgard serpent. This massive snake was destined to grow so large that it would encircle the entire earth and bring about the end of the world. Thor knew that the Jormungandr posed a serious threat to all of existence, and he was determined to destroy it before it grew up. However, when Thor confronted the serpent, he realized that it was stronger than he had anticipated. The two engaged in a fierce battle that shook the very foundations of the earth, but neither warrior was able to claim victory. Eventually, they agreed to call it a draw and part ways. But Thor knew that this was only a temporary truce. The Jormungandr would grow up eventually, and when it did, there would only be one winner. In at number 2, we have Hela. Hela was a powerful and fearsome goddess who ruled over the underworld. She wasn't just a typical villain, though. In fact, she was actually Thor's sister. Yes, you heard that right. Thor had a sister who ruled over the underworld. How messed up is that? Hela might have been Thor's sister, but she was also his greatest enemy. You see, Hela wasn't exactly thrilled about sharing her power with anyone, especially not her big brother, Thor. Whenever he entered her domain, he had to be careful, or he would risk incurring her wrath. But Hela wasn't just a jealous sister. She was also a force to be reckoned with. In fact, she was so powerful that she was able to hold her own against Thor in battle. So if you ever find yourself in the underworld, make sure to watch your back. You never know when Hela might strike. Finally, we've reached the top of our list, and coming in at number 1 is none other than Surtur. Surtur was the ruler of the fire giants, and he was one of the most feared creatures in all of Norse mythology. He was incredibly powerful, and he wasn't afraid to use his strength to get what he wanted. But Surtur wasn't just a mindless brute. He was actually a brilliant strategist who was always several steps ahead of his opponents. He was also incredibly cunning, and he used his intelligence to manipulate those around him. So if you ever found yourself facing off against Surtur, you better be prepared. He wasn't just a physical threat, he was a mental one too. But Thor was up for the challenge. He knew that Surtur was a formidable opponent, but he wasn't intimidated by the fire giant's power. In fact, Thor actually thrived on it. He enjoyed the challenge of facing off against such a powerful creature, and he wasn't afraid to use all of his strength to defeat Surtur. These two titans clashed in battle, shaking the very foundations of the cosmos. And in the end, it was Thor who came out on top. Hey, awesome viewers, we hope you enjoyed learning about Thor's greatest rivals. But now it's time for you to join the conversation. Which of Thor's enemies do you think was the most formidable? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic tales from the world of Norse mythology. Until next time, stay safe and keep an eye out for giants, snakes, and fire demons. She was not a goddess of glory, not a warrior, not a savior. Hell ruled the forgotten, the shamed, the dead no one sang for. You may have heard her name before, but do you know who she is? Let me tell you about 5 chilling facts about Hel, Queen of the Dead. Hel was not a goddess of glory, not a warrior, not a savior. Hel ruled the forgotten, the shamed, the dead. No one sang for. No trumpets blared when she rode across the fields of the underworld. No hymns echoed through the great halls of her domain. She was feared, yes, but that was not the same as respect. Hel was a chthonic deity, which means she was associated with the dead and the realm of the dead. But let's be clear here, because the word chthonic has another definition too. It also means gloomy, dark, even sinister. And so it is with Hel. She was cast into the underworld by Odin himself. One day, Odin, god of wisdom and magic and death, was brewing a potion. What kind of god doesn't like his potions, you ask? Well, they weren't always pleasant to drink, to say the least. But this particular concoction was meant to bring back Balder from the dead. Yes, that Balder, the son of Odin, the most beloved of the Aesir, whose death was so sad that even the gods wept for him. And what better person to ask for help than the all-knowing, all-seeing Odin? He brewed his best magic, ground up potent ingredients, stirred the mixture in a cauldron over a magical fire. But there was something missing. There was an ingredient that he couldn't seem to put his finger on, and the whole brew was rather bland without it. So he sent out a messenger to find someone who was both dead and alive, someone who had a taste of both worlds, a being who could provide just the right flavor for his potion. Who else but Hel, daughter of Loki, queen of the underworld, was both dead and alive. Though she wasn't called Hel at the time. She took on the form of a beautiful woman and traveled to Asgard, home of the Aesir. And as soon as she stepped foot on the golden streets, Odin knew this was the ingredient he was looking for. But how did he get her to agree to help him? You know, she was the queen of the underworld. She was busy. Well, let's just say Odin was very persuasive. And once he had her in his clutches, he forced her to drink the potion. In doing so, she became forever bound to the world of the living, which we would call Earth. But this arrangement was less than ideal for her. I mean, she was stuck between two worlds, neither fully one nor the other. So she retreated to the underworld where she was free from her father's grasp. Later, she would take on the name Hel, the name given to her by the people who revered her as a goddess. And she ruled the land of the dead with a cold, steady hand. Her body was half alive, half rotting. Some sources say she was half giant, half goddess. Perhaps that's where she got this look of hers. Her face was pale as ash, her hair the color of a corpse flower. Her eyes were like the first ice of winter, and when she walked, the ground shook as if an earthquake had just passed. So maybe don't try to make nice with her. Okay, maybe don't insult her, because if she didn't like you, she could send your soul down to the underworld just like that. But the truth is, Hel wasn't exactly heartless. She just had no choice but to follow the natural order. Think about it. If Hel were to start pulling people from their beds in the middle of the night and dragging their souls down to the underworld, well, that wouldn't be following the natural order now, would it? The natural order was that life ended when your time was up. When your soul left your body, it went to hell, whether you liked it or not. Hel wasn't some grim reaper figure who cut people's lives short. She was simply the one who collected those that had reached their natural end. Her realm was cold, silent, and inescapable. We already know that Hel's realm was the underworld. But what did that actually look like? Well, according to the poem Volusp, a Hastablik, or the prophecy of the seeress, when Hel rides across the fields of the underworld, the grass withers beneath her. The birds fall silent. All animals run away. The wolves stop howling. The snakes turn to ice. Everything stops when she appears. She brings the silence. Now, of course, you might think that this is just poetic license, a way of saying that things were super, mega quiet in the underworld. But if you think about it, these things aren't just going silent. They're actively dying around Hel, turning to ice, or running away in fear. The implication is that Hel isn't just the queen of the dead, she's also the harbinger of death. She doesn't just rule over the dead, she also causes death itself. And if you can cause death, then you're pretty powerful. So perhaps the silence of her realm isn't just a lack of sound, it's a lack of everything, a void that swallows light, life, hope, even time. In Hel's realm, there are no windows to look out of because there's nothing to see. No clocks to tell the time because time doesn't exist. There are no birds to sing to you because they're frozen solid. There's nothing but the cold embrace of death, and it's inescapable. For those who enter, there's no hope of leaving. You might think this sounds depressing. And sure, you'd probably feel depressed if you were trapped in this eternal silence. But it was the perfect place for Hel. She wasn't a goddess of joy or rebirth. She was a goddess of endings, of deaths, of goodbyes. And sometimes, the best way to say goodbye is to say nothing at all. Even the gods feared her power over the dead. If you've been watching our videos for any length of time, then you know that the gods weren't exactly the nicest, kindest beings in the world. Sure, they brought humans things like civilization, language, the wheel, agriculture, and every so often a hero would come along to save everyone from some monster. But mostly they seem to like making trouble for mortals, just for kicks, just for fun. Like, remember when Thor pretended to be a servant and made the sons of Ivaldi work for him by tricking them? Or when Loki killed Balder by throwing a dart made of mistletoe at him? That was fun. I remember. Or when Freya, the goddess of love, was taken captive by the giants and forced to be their thrall. Oh yeah, that was totally awesome. Yeah, sure, Thor came to rescue her, but only after he got drunk off of some giant mead. It was really more about the mead than saving Freya. But you get the point. The gods were selfish, petty, vindictive beings, and yet even they knew when to keep their distance. If the other gods had any problems, any issues that needed resolving, you know who they sent for? Hel. When Freya was taken captive by the giants, who did she beg for help? Not Thor, not Odin, not Balder, Hel. This shows you just how much the other gods respected her power, because they knew that while she might not be able to fight in battle or charm a spear into existence or make the grass grow, she could raise the dead. And while you might think that that sounds like something you'd only do as a last resort, the gods weren't shy about using Hel's powers for any number of reasons. After all, if you have the power to raise the dead, then it doesn't really matter why you do it. So next time you're in Asgard and you hear a bunch of the gods laughing loudly, like they're having a good time, you should probably keep walking. Don't go investigating. Just get out of there. In Ragnarok, she rises with the army of the damned. You may have heard of Ragnarok, the doom of the gods, the twilight of the gods, or the sons of Noru, depending on which source you read. Basically, it's when all the Norse gods are killed in a massive battle, ushering in a new age of peace and prosperity for the human world. But I'm not here to talk about the gods today. I'm here to talk about Hel. You see, in some versions of Ragnarok, Hel takes center stage. In Snorri Sturluson's Edda, he describes the return of the big bad snake, Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent which will swallow the sun and plunge the earth into darkness. It also lets loose a deadly poison that kills everyone on Earth except for 3 humans who will go on to repopulate the world. And what does Hel do during all this chaos? Well, she comes out of her realm, riding a chariot pulled by 8 zombie horses. She leads an army of the undead, the liches, the Draugr, the revenants, and she raises the dead humans of all 9 worlds to join her side. So why does she do this? Is she evil? Well, that depends on your definition of evil. Most people would probably say that raising an army of the dead to kill everyone on Earth is pretty evil. But if you think about it, she's just doing what she's always done, collecting the dead. And sure, she is helping out the big bad snake here, but that doesn't mean she's necessarily evil. She just doesn't take sides. She doesn't care about good or evil, only the dead. In fact, in another version of Ragnarok, she's actually on the side of good, sort of. In the poem Völuspá Hastablik I mentioned earlier, Hel helps Vidar, son of Odin, who was raised by wolves and therefore had a bone to pick with all wolves everywhere. Together they lead the forces of good against the forces of evil. So, maybe she's not evil, just unavoidable. Hel wasn't evil, she was inevitable. The part of death no one wants to face, because it doesn't end in glory. Subscribe for more echoes of the past. They come again and again in dreams to him, beckoning with finger raised. Then he wakes and wonders if they were friend or foe, if they bring peace or mean him ill. Here, behind me, is one of the most famous Viking burial mounds. It was built 1,000 years ago for a man named Egbert the Rich, whose wealth was considerable, whose power over the northern North Sea was absolute. And yet his legacy has been all but erased, leaving only this great mound and the echo of his name. And that got me thinking about something that we don't often think about. What happens to the Vikings after they died? We know so much about their raids and their politics and their daily life. But what happened when one of their number passed on? Did they have an afterlife? Was there a place for them in the great halls of Valhalla? Or did they simply cease to be? Well, join me now, won't you, as we look at 5 terrifying facts about the army of the dead. 5. They emerge from Niflheim, the realm of the forgotten. The Old Norse word for dead people is not actually dead people. In Old Norse, the word is hagur, which literally means something like the outcast or the abandoned. And it's those two concepts that seem to sum up how the Vikings viewed death. Death was a time of abandonment. It was a time when you were cast out, sent away from the warm hearth of the living to face whatever may lie ahead. It's a chilling thought and one that pervades their culture. So much so that their entire concept of the afterlife was based around this. When a person died, they didn't go to some great hall in the sky or even down to the underworld. Instead, they went to a place called Niflheim. Now, Niflheim isn't really a place so much as a state of being. You could say that it was a void, an absence, a place where all memory and warmth was leached from the world until nothing remained. Niflheim was also the name of the realm from which the army of the dead emerged in Norse prophecy. The army of the dead came from the land of mist and ice. They marched across the ravaged landscape of Niflheim, rounding up the lost souls of the dead. With their numbers growing ever greater, they prepared to march across the whole of Jotunheim and bring destruction to the whole of creation. 4. Their leader is Hel, the queen of the underworld. The leader of the army of the dead is one of the most fascinating figures in all of Norse mythology. Her name is Hel, and she is the ruler of the underworld. As far as rulers of the underworld go, Hel is actually pretty chill. She doesn't torture anyone, nor does she demand sacrifices. She simply rules over her domain and waits for Ragnarok to come. Of course, her father wasn't so chill. Loki, yes, the trickster god, the bane of the Aesir, is Hel's father, making her half-sister to the god of mischief himself. Hel's mother, though, is Angerboda, a giantess, daughter of the primordial being Ymir, who was in turn the mother of all giants. The gods, upon learning that Loki had produced a daughter with Angerboda, became worried about the implications of this child. After all of Loki's other children had been monsters, and they feared that this daughter would follow in their footsteps. So they decided to banish her from Asgard and send her to rule over the underworld. It's a good thing that Hel turned out to be such a nice person, otherwise Ragnarok could have gone very badly indeed. 3. They sail the ship made of dead men's nails, Naglfar. One of the scariest images in all of Norse mythology is that of the ship Naglfar. This ship is not made of wood nor of metal, but of human fingernails and toenails. Imagine that. The thought of some grotesque creature picking up your shed toenail, saving it, hoarding it away until eventually it can build itself a ship with it. That's horrifying. Anyway, the ship is then crewed by the army of the dead, an army so large that it must sail across the whole of the ocean in order to fit them all on board. But once they are all on board, once Hel calls the ship into motion, then there is no hope for the rest of the Norse pantheon. None of the gods can stop it. Nothing can stand against its progress. Its sails, made of rotting flesh, billow in the wind, and it plows straight through the waves towards the shores of doom. 2. Their arrival signals the beginning of Ragnarok. Once the ship Naglfar leaves the underworld and sets sail for the shores of Midgard, then there is no turning back. The journey of the ship is impossible. It cannot fail, and every step of its passage brings with it the advance of Ragnarok. It's kind of like the opening of the gates of hell in Christian mythology, except in this case, it's more like the release of all of the ghosts that have been trapped inside. There is no battle with the army of the dead. There is no victory to be had. Only fear and resignation await. As they march, the sun grows dim and the stars fall from the sky. Earthquakes shake the whole of creation. Mountains crumble and the seas boil and churn. Storms rage like never before, and all of nature weeps at the passing of Hell's host. By the time they reach land, all hope is lost. All that remains is for them to complete their terrible task. 1. Not even the gods can stop them. One of the truly terrifying things about the army of the dead is the fact that not even the gods can stop them. Thor tries. He lets loose his hammer, Mjolnir, and shatters the nails of Naglfar, only for new ones to grow in their place. Odin goes out to meet them, the All-Father, and he fights valiantly against the host of Hell. But for every god that falls, 2 more rise to take their place. Not even Heimdall can stop them. And he's the watchman of the gods, the guy whose job it is to watch the approach of danger and warn the gods of its coming. But he sees the army of the dead, and he knows that there is nothing he can do. So he sounds the great horn, Gungnir, and rallies the gods to their last stand. The army of the dead is relentless. It's unstoppable. And it moves forward with chilling determination towards the final battle of Ragnarok. And no matter what the gods throw against them, they keep coming. It's a truly chilling prospect. No matter how strong you are, no matter how skilled you might be, even the gods are helpless against the army of the dead. And when it comes for you, well, then my friend, I'm afraid that there is nothing you can do to stop it. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Echoes of the Past. If you did, please feel free to subscribe and leave a comment below to let us know what you thought. Also, if you would like to support the channel directly and get some really cool rewards for doing so, then why not check out our Patreon page? The link to that is provided below. Until next time, this is your host telling you to stay curious. They were not angels. They were not saviors. They were the choosers of the slain. In Norse myth, the Valkyries did not bring peace. They brought judgment. 5. Valkyries were death spirits, not warriors. For all their fierceness, their skill in battle, and their fierce independence, the Valkyries weren't exactly flesh and blood, at least most of them. You see, the word Valkyrie means chooser of the slain, daughter of Odin. And while they may have looked like mortal women, they were far from it. No, Valkyries were half-spirit, half-human hybrids, or sometimes purely spiritual beings whose purpose was to do Odin's bidding. And that meant bringing fallen warriors back to Asgard to serve the All-Father's purposes. That said, there were some Valkyries who had a bit more of a warrior streak than others. Take the legendary Brynhildr, who was so skilled in battle that she was actually banned from fighting alongside the gods for fear that she would outshine them. But fear not, brave heroes. If your Valkyrie ever challenged you to a duel, it was just her way of testing your skills. Just don't let her catch you cheating like the Niflung did when they tricked her into letting them live after their defeat. She might be a little miffed. 4. They chose who died and who lived in. The sagas and Eddas, Valkyries are often depicted as riding across the battlefield after a great fight is over, choosing which fighters get to die and which ones get to come home. A common misconception is that Valkyries only decide who lives or dies on the field of battle, but they didn't really decide that either. Valkyries were present during battles, yes, and they could even join the fray, but they were also servants of Odin, and Odin wanted as many warriors in Asgard as he could get. So the Valkyries weren't looking to mow down hordes of enemies. Instead, they'd pick up warriors who fought bravely, but weren't quite worthy of Odin's favor yet. Then the Valkyrie would carry them back to Asgard and raise them up again with their health and strength restored. The warriors would then be sent out again to do battle until the Valkyrie called them back to Asgard once more. Meanwhile, those who died on the field remained dead. The Valkyries didn't typically bring them back, though there were exceptions to this rule. For example, when the hero Sigmund was killed, his son Sinfiotli went to Urd's well to bring him back. 3. They served Odin but feared hell. You know how they say, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em? Well, that's kind of what happened with the Valkyries. Originally, they were called the Einherjar and served the chief god Thor instead of Odin. But when Odin discovered that Thor wasn't making use of the power these Einherjar provided him, he struck a deal with the giant king Loki to trade his two goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjost, for the Einherjar. After the deal went through, Odin took the Einherjar under his wing, raised them up in his hall in Asgard, and renamed them Valkyries, a title that clearly shows who their new patron was. That said, while the Valkyries were loyal to Odin, they feared his wife Hel, whose realm they occasionally had to travel through. Valkyries weren't the only ones who feared Hela, though. Even the mighty Thor dreaded crossing paths with her. And he was a god. He knew the worst place he could go was Hel's Hall, the one his brother Loki had taken him to on that fateful fishing trip long ago. And since Valkyries frequently visited Hel, there's no doubt that they shared his fears. After all, Hel ruled over death and the underworld, so the Valkyries probably didn't want to stick around too long in her domain. 2. They could fall in love and fall from grace. We've established that Valkyries are not exactly known for their chill, easygoing natures. They're fierce, independent, and devoted to Odin. So it's probably not surprising that they were often seen as arrogant, stubborn, and even hot-headed. So it goes without saying that whenever a Valkyrie fell in love, it was a big deal. In fact, one of the most famous tales involving Valkyries, the Volsunga saga, hinges on the romance between a human shield maiden named Brynhild and a Valkyrie named Otjar. While the story goes that Odin had forbidden Valkyries from falling in love with humans, Otjar couldn't help herself, and she loved Brynhild so much that she left Odin's service and threw in her lot with the humans. Unfortunately, she was cursed by Odin to lose her memory upon touching the ground, and so she eventually forgot Brynhild and returned to Asgard. Still, the two were able to reunite before Otjar's true love was sent off to war. And this time, Odin allowed the couple to stay together. As you might expect, not all stories about Valkyries falling in love with mortals had such happy endings, however. Like in the tale of the legendary King Sigurd, where the Valkyrie, well, let's just say things didn't end well for her. 1. Not all chosen. Went to Valhalla, it should come as no surprise that Valkyries were responsible for deciding which warriors got to rest in Valhalla. It was, after all, Odin's hall, and he was hardly going to let just anyone wander in. Of course, it stands to reason that being a Valkyrie meant having the ability to choose which warriors were worthy of that honor and which weren't. This could be based on skill in battle, bravery, or sheer potential. Or perhaps it was personal preference, as in the Valkyrie simply liked the person and wanted them to be rewarded. We'll never know. But the fact remains that Valkyries had the final say when it came to determining who entered Valhalla. And if you weren't chosen, well, you might find yourself in Folkvang instead. Unlike Valhalla, Folkvang wasn't ruled by Odin but by Freya, and it's described as being full of gold, delicious food, and beautiful people. So it wasn't exactly a bad place to end up, even if you weren't technically supposed to be there. Then again, if a Valkyrie decided you didn't deserve to live, you wouldn't end up anywhere. Nice, because death in battle wasn't exactly pleasant. So it's probably best to leave the whole Valhalla or Folkvang thing to them. Now you need to watch what really happened to the Valkyries after Ragnarok, or have a look at these other videos instead. Freya, the Shining One, the goddess of love and death in Norse mythology, is widely known for her beauty, her vast wealth, and her powerful magic. But what else did this deity have to offer? From a great hall to a magic necklace, here are 5 dark secrets of Freya. Welcome back to another episode of our series where we take you back in time to bring you the best in historical tales. Today we're discussing the lesser-known facts about the legendary goddess Freya. So let's get into it. Number 5. Freya received half of all warriors. Most people know that when a warrior died in battle, they had a chance to enter Valhalla, the great hall of Odin, where he would welcome them with open arms, feast with them, and send them back into battle again and again. What most don't know is that Freya also claimed half of all warriors who died in battle, taking those she deemed worthy to her own hall, Folkvanger. It was said that Freya walked among the corpses on the battlefield after the fighting had ended, picking out those she wanted with her. And when they awoke, they found themselves inside Folkvanger. Here, instead of sending them back to fight more battles, she feasted with them every day until their deaths, delaying their entrance to the afterlife. After receiving such an honor from the goddess of death, these warriors were said to feel no fear or sadness about their fate, knowing that they would be well cared for in Folkvanger until their eventual journey to the afterlife. In Norse mythology, Valhalla was by far the most well-known place that warriors could go once they had died in battle. But Folkvanger was by no means inferior. While Odin chose which warriors would come to him based on their fighting skills and bravery, Freya chose those she wanted based on her personal preference. As such, there were those who believed that being chosen for Valhalla was much more honorable than being chosen for Folkvanger. However, since Freya was the goddess of love, beauty, gold, and death, anyone who entered her hall would receive a feast fit for a god every single night, with many believing that her hall may have even been more luxurious than that of Odin's. Gnome 4. Her hall, Folkvanger, Revold Valhalla. If you thought Freya's choice of warriors was surprising, wait until you hear about her hall. Located somewhere in Folkvang, or the Field of the Slain, was Freya's great hall. Here she received those she deemed worthy after their deaths, feasting with them and delaying their entrance into the afterlife. Though it may seem strange that the goddess of death would do this, it makes sense when you remember that Freya wasn't only the goddess of death, but also of life and fertility. For her, death was simply a part of life, and she saw nothing wrong with celebrating both. The hall itself was described as being extremely beautiful, filled with gold, treasure, and artwork. While Odin's hall was made of wood, Freya's was made of metal. This may not sound like a big difference, but in Norse culture, metal was seen as a symbol of wealth, strength, and durability, making it much more desirable than wood. Additionally, while Valhalla was only able to hold 500 warriors at a time, Folkvanger was massive enough to hold 2,000, though some sources say it could hold up to 4,000. That's almost double the size of any other great hall associated with the Norse gods. With such a large hall, Freya was able to welcome many more warriors than Odin, though it's unclear if she was doing this to compete with her father or if it was purely because she liked having company. Number 3, she practiced Satyr, a dark Norse magic. Satyr was an extremely controversial topic in Norse culture. While many believed it to be a form of witchcraft, others argued that it was merely a type of poetry. The truth was likely somewhere in between, as Satyr seemed to encompass many different forms of magic, including divination, healing, weather manipulation, and even the ability to put curses on your enemies. Unfortunately, the use of Satyr came with a very negative stigma, mostly because it was primarily practiced by women. As a result, many people viewed the practice as a form of devil worship, believing that witches would summon demons or other evil entities in order to perform their spells. Even worse, practicing Satyr was seen as a sign of great disrespect towards the gods. In fact, during the Viking Age, a man who was caught practicing Satyr alongside women could be sentenced to exile or even death. Freya, being the goddess of death, obviously didn't care about the dangers associated with Satyr, as she herself was said to be one of the most powerful practitioners of the craft. She was even said to have taught some humans how to practice Satyr, giving them knowledge of powerful spells that allowed them to control animals, manipulate the weather, and even see into the future. One of her most notable students was the shield maiden Clint, who used her newfound abilities to lead her people to victory against their enemies. Unfortunately, Clint was later killed by her own brother, who had been jealous of her powers. But this didn't stop Freya from resurrecting her student, bringing her back to Folkvanger so they could feast together for eternity. Number 2, her necklace, Brisingamen came at a price. Brisingamen is one of the most famous pieces of jewelry in Norse mythology, with its 4 compartments said to hold the very stars. The necklace was originally owned by the dwarven king Alvis, who gave it to his daughter to wear on her wedding day. However, when the goddess Freya saw Brisingamen, she demanded that Alvis give it to her, offering to pay for it with a hefty price. Being unable to refuse the goddess, Alvis agreed to trade the necklace for Freya's services, meaning that the goddess would have to sleep with him in order to earn it. Of course, Freya was able to easily defeat the dwarf and take the necklace for herself without paying up. However, she didn't just keep it for herself. Instead, she shared it with her sister, Freya, showing just how generous the goddess of death could be sometimes. While the sisters both looked beautiful in the necklace, Brisingamen held much more power than the sisters knew, as it was said to have the ability to make anyone who wore it irresistible to all living beings regardless of gender. Eventually, the necklace fell into the hands of the goddess Saga, whose beauty was so great that it caused the entire world to freeze over as no one could look away from her. Luckily for humanity, Odin was able to rescue Brisingamen from her and return it to Freya, where it remained until the end of the world. Number 1. She may have been a vanished war goddess. If you thought Freya was a benevolent goddess, then this final secret will surely surprise you. Recently, academics have begun to argue that the goddess Freya may have actually been a vanished war goddess who led the Vanir tribe during their conflicts with the Aesir. The theory claims that over time, her image was rewritten to become a goddess of love and death instead, possibly due to her association with the Vanir tribe, who were known for their fertility magic. However, this rewriting wasn't done across the board, as many texts still show Freya leading her followers into battle and claiming the souls of fallen warriors. Either way, the theory has a lot of merit, especially considering that Freya's original name was Yngvi, which meant battle or war. This would make sense considering that her father was the god of rain and thunder, and her brother was the god of the sun. But Freya's true nature, as a possible vanished war goddess, isn't nearly as scary as it sounds, as academics have argued that the vanished weren't inherently evil, but rather simply represented chaos, wildness, and the untamed forces of nature. Therefore, a vanished war goddess would not necessarily be an evil deity, but rather one who valued freedom and change above all else. In fact, when the Vanir and Aesir went to war, it was Freya who helped broker a peace treaty between them, cementing her status as a goddess of love and fertility. Thanks so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed learning about the 5 dark secrets of Freya. Do you know of any other lesser-known facts about her? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Bye. The wind howled across the barren North Sea, whipping waves into a frenzy and sending spray high into the pale sky. A lone boat battled against the churning waters, driven by the urgent need for sanctuary. Inside it, 3 men clung to the mast, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. One of them, tall and powerfully built, had a thick red beard braided with iron rings. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, were fixed on the horizon, searching for a glimpse of land. Next to him huddled a younger man, slight of build with sandy hair and a determined expression. The third man, balding in patches, wore a fur cloak over his shoulders and kept a sharp lookout over the railing. As the boat tossed and turned, the youngest spoke up. "Surely we're close to land, right?" The big man shook his head, his jaw grim. "We have been at sea for many days now. Our supplies are low, and the storm shows no signs of abating." "There!" the lookout suddenly cried, pointing to a distant dark shape looming through the mist. "Land ho!" Hope surged through the weary travelers, renewing their strength. They pulled on the ropes, urging the boat forward. As they drew closer, they could make out a towering figure standing on the shore. He was tall and muscular, with skin as dark as storm clouds and long flowing hair the color of gold. His eyes, sharp and intense, seemed to pierce their very souls. When he spoke, his voice boomed like thunder. "Who comes to my shores?" The men exchanged uneasy glances. They were approaching the realm of Utgard, ruled by the fearsome giant Utgard, Loki's half-brother and one of the most powerful beings in all of Jotunheim. In Norse mythology, the world was divided into 9 realms, each with its own ruler. Asgard was home to the Aesir, the chief god of which was Odin. Vanaheim was ruled by Freyr and Freya. Midgard was where humans lived, and the giants resided in Utgard. Known for their immense size and strength, the giants were often at odds with the gods. Determined to put their best foot forward, the trio did their best to appear noble and important. "Fear not, mighty Utgarth," the biggest of the 3 said, his voice echoing with false bravado. "We mean you no harm. We are simply travelers who have been shipwrecked and seek only your aid and hospitality." Utgarth scrutinized them, his expression unreadable. Finally, he grunted. "Very well, I shall grant you safe passage. But know this, any trickery or deceit will be met with swift retribution." With that, he gestured for them to unload their boat and follow him. But their problems were far from over. As they entered Utgard, they found themselves in a vast courtyard surrounded by towering walls. Before them stood a massive gate adorned with snarling wolf heads. Suddenly, a deep voice boomed from behind them. "So, you would enter Utgard, eh? Then you must first prove yourselves worthy." They turned to see a huge boar blocking their path. Its tusks were like curved swords, and its eyes glowed with an eerie green light. Before our heroes could react, the boar charged. The biggest man sprang into action, blocking the creature's path with his shield. It was a fierce battle. The boar lunged and smashed, but the man held firm. Just when it seemed he might prevail, the boar gored him in the side, sending him crashing to the ground. Hope seemed to drain from his eyes. Was this to be their end? Then a smaller figure darted forward, brandishing a spear. With a well-aimed throw, he transfixed the boar, bringing it down. Utgarth watched silently, his gaze sharp and unwavering. Finally, when he spoke, his voice echoed with approval. "You have shown valor and skill. Pass." He gestured for them to enter Utgard. Within the courtyard, they found themselves in a grand hall adorned with intricate carvings and glowing runes. At the far end sat Utgard on a throne of polished stone, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "I am impressed," he boomed, "but your trials are not yet over. If you wish to gain my favor, you must face Fenrir, my loyal companion." Fear flickered across their faces, but they knew they had no choice. Fenrir was a monstrous wolf, its fur as black as night, its eyes burning like molten gold. Its teeth were like daggers, and its claws sharper still. The men drew their weapons, bracing for battle. But after a vicious fight, they found themselves lying, wounded and defeated before Fenrir's might. Utgarth watched impassively as the wolf circled them, its hot breath steaming in the air. Then he spoke. "You have fought bravely, but your weapons are useless against Fenrir. To prove your worth, you must offer him something far greater, your hand." Their eyes widened in horror. To offer a hand to a monster like Fenrir was a fate worse than death. Yet they knew it was their only chance. The biggest man hesitated, his gaze flickering between the snarling wolf and the expectant giant. Finally, with a deep breath, he stepped forward, holding out his hand. Fenrir sniffed it cautiously, then opened its jaws, revealing a cavernous darkness. The man took a step back, fear momentarily overriding his determination. But the moment passed. With a final surge of bravery, he pressed on, placing his hand into the wolf's mouth. A sharp pain shot through him as the jaws clamped shut around his hand. His scream echoed through the hall as he struggled against the vice-like grip. But it was no use. Fenrir had him. Utgarth rose from his throne, his face grim. "So be it," he boomed, Let the sacrifice commence. With a swift movement, he plunged a dagger into the heart of the hand, severing the connection between man and beast. As the injured man stumbled back, his face drained of color, a single word escaped his lips. Help. But his pleas fell on deaf ears. Fenrir snarled, baring its bloody fangs. The other two men could do nothing but watch in horror as the wolf prepared to make its kill. But just as Fenrir was about to strike, a figure suddenly leapt into the fray. It was the smallest of the three, the one who had thrown the spear at the boar. Now he stood before Fenrir, his eyes flashing with defiance. "Enough!" he cried, his voice ringing with newfound power. "Release him, beast, or face my wrath." Utgarth watched intently, a hint of amusement playing on his lips. This was a bold move, but would it be enough? Fenrir cocked its head, regarding the newcomer with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. For a moment, the only sound was the heavy breathing of the two combatants. Then Fenrir let out a low growl and backed away, disappearing into the shadows. The young man stood firm, his gaze unwavering until the wolf was out of sight. Only then did he allow himself to relax, his shoulders slumping slightly. Utgarth clapped his hands together, the sound echoing through the hall. "Well done," he boomed. "You have shown great courage and selflessness. I am impressed." Turning to the injured man, he added, "Your sacrifice was honorable, though perhaps unnecessary." The man looked up, his face still pale but a grateful smile touching his lips. "It had to be done," he whispered. And so it was that the small and brave man gained eternal honor for his selflessness. Utgarth, impressed by the man's actions, offered him a place in his court, an offer he humbly accepted. Together they worked to forge a bond of understanding between the gods and the giants, ensuring peace between their realms. And though the tales of his bravery may have faded with time, the memory of Tyr's sacrifice lived on, a beacon of hope and inspiration for all who heard his story. In the latest episode, we looked at some of the ways the Norsemen adapted old pagan beliefs into early Christian writings. Today, we're going to take a closer look at one of the most important figures from pre-Christian Scandinavia. I'm talking about a man who may have been called Onund, Einar, or Ivar. He was also known as Ragnar Lothbrok, a legendary Viking warrior and king of Denmark. The name Ragnar means army or horde, and Lothbrok means of the big loaf, presumably a large ceremonial loaf like those used in the old Germanic initiation rituals. We know from the sagas that he was one of the first Vikings to raid England, and if the sagas are to be believed, he had a rather eventful death, being thrown into a pit of poisonous snakes and then finally executed by King Ella of Northumbria. But what does archaeology have to say about this infamous Viking? Well, unfortunately, very little. There are actually very few archaeological sources connected with Ragnar or his sons, and none of them prove conclusively that Ragnar was a real historical person. All of the evidence comes from two places, Denmark and England. In Denmark, there is a single coin minted in Birka, which shows a raven holding a battle axe in its beak, which may allude to Ragnar. There's also a rune stone in Västergötland that has the inscription, "In memory of Ragnar, son of Gorm," and another rune stone at Hoby in Fionia reads, "To Ragnar and his sons, a victory monument raised over the two brave warriors." But these are just two short inscriptions, nothing more. Then across the sea in England, we have a couple of place names, Raven Scar and Blood-Sworn Cliff. The story goes that Ragnar gave the cliff this gruesome name after killing Ella's sons and then dipping his bread in their blood. However, this is almost certainly a later addition to the saga, and it reflects a well-known motif in Viking culture where heroes dip their bread in the blood of their enemies. So is Ragnar Lothbrok a real historical person? Well, it's possible, but there is no archaeological evidence that proves it. However, this is not unique to Ragnar. This is the problem with trying to study legendary figures like Ragnar Lothbrok. because they appear so late in the written sources, long after the events they describe are supposed to have taken place. They are part of an oral tradition that developed over many generations, and there is usually so much time between the supposed historical event and the writing of the saga that it is impossible to trace back the source material to an actual event. And archaeologists are always going to be playing catch-up. Okay, so what about his son? Surely there must be some archaeological evidence for Ivar the Boneless, right? Well, hold on to your horned helmets, everybody, because we have a silver penny minted by King Aeli of Northumbria. It was minted in 866 AD, just 5 years before Ragnar supposedly kicked the bucket. One side shows a ship with a dragon head prow and the inscription Ael Northumbria Rex, meaning King Aela of Northumbria. The other side shows a hand holding a standard and the inscription ICLB, which likely means victory belongs to Isle. Now, it might seem pretty far-fetched that a Viking prince would turn up in Northumbria in the year 862 and mint his own coins. But remember that the whole point of the sagas is to glorify the Danish kings, so it is perfectly possible that they left out a little detail or two. Still, I think we can safely say that there was probably some truth behind the legend. Maybe that Ragnar led a group of Vikings into Northumbria and pillaged the countryside, or perhaps even that he died there. But a literary mission? That seems a bit unlikely. Now, before I continue, I want to say that while it is impossible to find direct archaeological evidence for most legendary people, there is one exception, and that is the famous Viking warrior queen, Lagertha. She is mentioned in both the Ingvar saga and the Vers saga, and according to the stories, she was the daughter of a Swedish king, wife to another king, and the mother of a third, and each of these 3 husbands meet their end at her hand. Is there any truth to these tales? Well, maybe. There is a potential runic inscription that mentions her at Solsta, Sweden, and it reads, Lagertha, the shield maiden, made this stone in memory of her brother. And if this really is Lagertha, then we know that she could read and write, which was fairly unusual for women at the time, let alone a shield maiden. But while the stone is undoubtedly connected with her, I doubt that it will ever be possible to uncover the truth behind the legends. But let's move away from legendary figures and talk about something tangible, like this brooch, for instance. This exquisite piece of jewelry was found in 1939 during excavations at the Viking burial site of Galahus in Denmark. It dates back to around the year 950, and it was found alongside the skeleton of a woman who was buried in a magnificent gown, along with several pieces of jewelry and a pouch containing over 200 Arabic dirhams. The brooch is decorated with 3 birds, a snake, a fish, a knotwork design, and a mysterious Z-shaped symbol. Birds and snakes are relatively common symbols in Viking art, but this particular style is unique, and I wasn't able to find any examples quite like it anywhere else. If you have any thoughts about what the Z-shaped symbol might represent, please let me know down in the comments section below. Another incredible example of Viking art is the rock carvings at Rook. These are found in a small village in southern Sweden and date back to around the year 800. The rune stones are covered in a variety of different images, including dragons, serpents, animals, and ships. The inscription tells the story of a man named Ragnarok and his journey to the east. It is also one of the longest runic inscriptions in Sweden, and it includes some phrases that have never appeared on any other runic stone, so it provides us with an invaluable insight into the Viking mindset. Speaking of mindsets, let's spend a moment looking at a coin hoard. These were discovered in 1985 on the island of Gotland. It contained 171 Arabic silver dirhams dating back to between 793 and 867. This is very interesting for a number of reasons. First, it shows that the Vikings were active traders and had connections all the way to the Middle East. Second, it demonstrates that there was a high demand for Islamic currency in Scandinavia, and it likely played a major role in financing Viking expansion. And third, it proves that Viking hoards rarely contained silver. You see, there is a popular misconception that Vikings stashed away their treasure in secret hiding places, but most of the time their idea of a savings account was burying a bunch of stuff in a bog and then building a giant burial mound on top. That way, their wealth could be protected by magic and guarded by their ancestors. So if you're going to hide your loot in a bog, why bother burying some crappy silver coins when you can get loads of valuable Arabic cash? That's like burying Monopoly money. And hoarding bog bodies like this one were often sacrificed victims whose bodies were cast in a mold of clay before being interred in the bogs. Finally, I want to show you this neat little modern-day artifact. It comes from Burka, where archaeologists uncovered the remains of a wooden building that once served as a large warehouse. Inside, they found traces of plant pollen and seeds from all around the Baltic Sea. But most fascinating of all, they found fragments of board games. Now, these are the oldest complete games of their type ever found in Scandinavia, and they likely date back to the 10th century. Here you can see one of the dice bags with its leather drawstring. And here are the dice themselves made from animal bone. And here is the game board showing the routes around the Baltic Sea. And here are some of the playing pieces. So how did the game work? Well, the rules are a bit complicated, so I won't bore you with the details, but basically it worked like this. Each player chose a token and then tried to race their opponent around the Baltic Sea by throwing the dice and landing on various ports. Some ports allowed players to collect resources such as grain and wood, but others were dangerous and could cause you to lose everything. Now there is a lot that we don't understand about the game, such as the significance of the yellow dots. Was it a port, or a resource, or just a random hazard? We simply don't know. And with that, we come to the end of another episode. Let me know what you thought about this installment of Echoes of the Past. Thanks to my patrons for helping me keep this channel running, and shout out to History for making videos like this one possible. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and check out my new podcast available online. Until next time, it's me. Stay safe, everybody.
In Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is the name of a giant ash tree that connects all of the 9 realms in the universe. It's also known as the World Tree, and it is said to have been created by the gods at the beginning of time to serve as the foundation of the cosmos. Now, this concept of a world tree connecting different realms is pretty common in mythology around the world. So where did the Norsemen come up with this idea? Well, they probably didn't come up with it. They got it from the Germanic people who came before them, and the Germanic people most likely got it from the Celts. But do you want to let that bother you? Because what we're going to do now is explore Yggdrasil and the 9 realms that it connects. Now, these realms are usually divided into 3 groups of 3. There's the upper, middle, and lower realms. But there's also another way of dividing them. You can divide them into the land of the living, the land of the dead, and the land in between. And so with that, let's get started with the first realm, Asgard. Asgard is the home of the Aesir gods, and it lies in the uppermost branch of Yggdrasil, the topmost of the 9 realms, connected by the roots of Asgard is said to be a place of great beauty and abundance. It is here where the gods hold their great feasts, and where they make their plans for the future. In Norse mythology, Asgard is often described as being protected by a wall made of gold that is so tall and wide that it is impossible to see over or around it. And within the walls of Asgard are many wondrous places. There's Valhalla, where the bravest of warriors are taken after they die to live with Odin in his great hall. And there's Folkvang, where the goddess Freya rules over her own domain and chooses which warriors will go to her hall after they die. And then there's the Hall of Aegir, where the gods go to party and drink and make merry. And that's just a few of the places in Asgard. There are many other halls and places that the gods call home, like the home of Thor and the home of Frigga and Freya. Now, Asgard was one of the favorite places of the Norse gods, and for good reason. It was a place of power and glory, and it was where the gods felt most at home. The next realm, Vanaheim, is one that's not talked about too much in Norse mythology. It's the home of the Vanir gods, and it's said to be a place of great magic and fertility. Now, unlike the Aesir gods, not much is known about the Vanir gods, but what we do know is that they were a very powerful group of deities. The most well-known of the Vanir gods is Frey, who's associated with the sun and the fertility of the earth. Now, in some myths, Frey is said to rule over while in others he travels all over the 9 realms, bringing his message of love and peace to all who will listen. Now Vanaheim is located at the very top of Yggdrasil, connected by its roots to the other realms, and it's said to be a place of great beauty and wonder. Some sources say that Vanaheim is hidden away, and that only those who are pure of heart can find it. And others say that it's right there in plain sight, but that most people are too blind to see it. Now, regardless of where exactly it's located, one thing is for sure: Vanaheim is a place that's full of magic and mystery. It's a place where the veil between the worlds is at its thinnest, and it's a place where the gods and mortals can come together to learn from each other. Now, moving to the third realm of the upper group of three, we have Alfheim as the home of the Light Elves, or the Luminous Elves, and it's said to be a place of great beauty and wonder. Some say it's even more beautiful than Asgard, if you can believe that. It is said that the streets of Elvenwood are paved with gold, and that the houses are made of crystal and precious stones. And that's not all either. The elves are said to be masters of magic, and they use their powers to create all sorts of beautiful things. They make their own clothing out of spider silk and moonlight, and they ride through the air on the backs of eagles. Now, if you ask me, it sounds like a pretty great place to live, but unfortunately, it's not all sunshine and rainbows in Elfheim. Like every realm, it has its own problems. For example, the elves are constantly at war with the Dark Elves, or the Svartafar, who live in the underworld. But despite all the fighting, Elfheim is still a beautiful and enchanting place, and it's definitely worth visiting if you ever get the chance. Moving on to the second group of three realms, we have Now, of course, you already know about this one. This is the realm of the humans, and it's located right in the middle of the World Tree. Now, there's not much to say about this one that you don't already know. You live here. You know how this place works. Just remember that, while you might think that this is just an ordinary world, it's actually full of magic and danger. You just have to keep your eyes open to see it. Just because you don't see the giants and the monsters and the gods doesn't mean they're not out there. I'm just saying. Next, we have Niflheim, which is one of the most terrifying realms in Norse mythology. Niflheim is the land of mist and darkness, and it's said to be the home of all sorts of evil creatures. It's ruled over by the goddess Hel, and it's where the souls of those who have died an unnatural death go. Now, if you ask me, that's pretty messed up. It's bad enough to have lost your life, but then to have your soul trapped in a place of darkness and evil forever, that's just cruel. But that's just how things are in Niflheim. Now, the realm itself is said to be a very dangerous place, and only the bravest of souls dare to enter it. Those who do enter Niflheim say that it's a place of endless night, where the only light comes from the fires that the demons use to torture their victims. It's a place of ice and fire, of darkness and light, and it's a place where the laws of this world simply don't apply. If you're in Niflheim, you can expect the unexpected. Next, we have Jotunheim, which is the realm of the giants. Now, these aren't your average giants, mind you. These guys are huge, like mountain-sized, huge, and they're incredibly strong and tough. Even the gods are afraid of them. Now, Jotunheim is a harsh and unforgiving place, and it's ruled over by the goddess Gienah. It's a place of ice and snow, and the only way to survive there is to be strong and resilient. That's why the giants of Jotunheim are such formidable opponents. They're used to the harsh conditions of their homeland, and they've had to fight tooth and nail for everything they've ever gotten. Now, despite all this, it's not all bad news for the giants. They have a strong sense of community, and they're willing to help each other out no matter what. That's why Jotunheim is one of the 9 realms that's still standing today, because the giants refused to give up. They fought back against the gods, and they held their own. Finally, we have the realm of Now, you've probably never heard of this one before, but it's actually one of the most important realms in Norse mythology. Muspelheim is the land of fire, and it's said to be the home of the fire giants. Now, these fire giants are not to be confused with the regular giants. They're actually a different breed altogether. They're born of the flames of Muskrat, and they're completely immune to fire and heat. Now, Muspelheim is a very dangerous place to live, but it's also a place of great power. It's said that the fire giants are incredibly strong, and they have a deep understanding of magic. In fact, it is believed that the fire giants were the ones who taught the gods some of their most powerful spells. Now, despite all this power, the fire giants are a dying race. Their numbers have been dwindling for years, and it looks like it won't be long before they disappear completely. That's because the realm of Muspelheim is slowly being consumed by darkness. As the shadows grow longer, the fire giants become weaker and weaker, until finally, they'll be nothing but a distant memory. So those are the 9 realms of Norse mythology. Each one is unique and fascinating in its own way, and together they form a rich and complex cosmology. But before we go, I want to hear from you. Which realm is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you want to support us, please hit that subscribe button. Until next time, Stay safe and stay curious. Oh, and happy Yule.
Legends tell of a mighty warrior who wielded a fearsome weapon, one that shook the very foundations of the 9 realms. His name was Thor, the god of thunder, and his hammer, Mjolnir, was not just a tool of war, but a symbol of hope and justice. Join us today as we delve into the lore and uncover 5 incredible facts about Thor's legendary hammer Mjolnir. Before we start, remember to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our awesome videos. Also, stick around until the end to learn about a special offer just for you. But for now, let's turn our attention to the world of Norse mythology and the mighty Thor. Number 5. Forged by the dwarven brothers Sindri and Brokkr. The story of Mjolnir begins with 2 dwarven brothers named Sindri and Brokkr. These master craftsmen were renowned throughout the 9 realms for their skill in metalworking, having forged many magical weapons and artifacts for gods and mortals alike. One day, the brothers decided to create a masterpiece, a hammer that would be unlike any other. They toiled over their anvil, hammering and shaping the metal until it was perfect. When they were finished, they presented the hammer to Thor, who was so impressed by its craftsmanship that he immediately accepted it as his own. Mjolnir was not just any ordinary hammer. It was a weapon of immense power, capable of shaking the very foundations of the 9 realms. With its unbreakable head and unbreakable handle, it became Thor's signature weapon, one that he would use to defend the innocent and punish the wicked. Sindri and Brokkr had created something truly special, a hammer that would become a legend. Number 4. Said to always return to Thor's hand when thrown. Mjolnir was more than just a powerful weapon, it was also incredibly convenient. Norse mythology tells us that once Thor threw his hammer, it would always return to his hand no matter how far away it went. This handy ability allowed Thor to fight with reckless abandon, knowing that he would always be able to retrieve his weapon. In fact, there are many stories of Thor using this ability to trick his enemies, making them think he had missed them, only to snatch the hammer back at the last second and smash them over the head. This must have been pretty intimidating for Thor's opponents, knowing that they couldn't escape the God of Thunder's wrath no matter where they ran. Imagine being on the receiving end of that. Just as Thor was about to strike you down, his hammer suddenly flew back into his hand, and he started laughing at your futile attempts to escape. Talk about a bad day. But it wasn't just convenience that made Mjolnir such an effective weapon. Its ability to always return to Thor's hand also showed his mastery over it. After all, Thor was the only one who could wield the hammer with its full power, and if he lost it, he would lose his main source of power. That's why Thor was so determined to get Mjolnir back in his hand. No matter what, he knew that its power could help him save Midgard from danger and protect his people. So if you ever find yourself on the wrong side of a battle with Thor, keep an eye on that hammer. You never know when it might come flying back to smash you. No 3. Its strikes could summon lightning and thunder. The power of Thor's hammer Mjolnir was truly awe-inspiring. When he swung it, lightning flashed and thunder boomed across the sky. It was as if the hammer itself was a conduit for the raw power of nature, allowing Thor to control the very elements. In Norse mythology, Thor was known as the god of thunder for a reason, and Mjolnir was the source of that power. With each strike of the hammer, he could summon bolts of lightning that crackled and sparked across the battlefield, leaving his enemies charred and smoking. But Thor's control over the weather didn't stop there. He could also call upon massive thunderstorms that shook the ground and sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest warriors. And when Mjolnir struck the earth, it was said that the very mountains trembled before its might. Just imagine the sheer force it took to level those colossal peaks. It's no wonder then that Thor was so feared by his enemies. He was literally the god of thunder. And when he unleashed the full force of his mighty hammer Mjolnir, there was no hope of survival. But it wasn't just brute force that made Mjolnir such a powerful weapon. Its ability to control the weather also gave Thor a strategic advantage in battle. He could summon rain to quench his allies' thirst, or use lightning to blind his enemies. He could also unleash blizzards and storms to hinder his opponent's movements or cause earthquakes to shake them to their core. Thor's mastery of the elements was unmatched, and his hammer, Mjolnir, was the key to his power. No. 2. So powerful, only Thor could lift it. Not even the strongest mortal could lift Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Only those deemed worthy by the ancient dwarves who forged it would be granted the strength to hold it. But why was Mjolnir so heavy? There must have been some serious weight behind that mighty warhammer. Well, it wasn't just for show. The weight of Mjolnir symbolized the immense power it contained. To wield such power, one must be worthy, both in strength and character, and Thor was the only one who met these high standards. But it wasn't just Thor's physical strength that allowed him to lift Mjolnir. He also had to prove himself to be worthy of its power. After all, the hammer was a tool of justice, and Thor was the god of thunder, known for his bravery, strength, and unwavering determination to protect the innocent. This is evident in the story of when Mjolnir was stolen by Loki, the god of mischief. Even though Thor was initially unable to lift the hammer without its return, he refused to give up. He trained and proved his worthiness until he regained the power to wield Mjolnir and defeat his enemies. This just goes to show that Thor wasn't just a brute force. He had to earn the right to be called the god of thunder, and only when he was worthy could he lift and use Mjolnir to its full potential. So while it may seem like a simple feat, lifting Thor's hammer was actually a test of character, strength, and determination. It wasn't just a physical challenge. It was a test of one's will and resolve. Number 1, it was the protector of gods and mortals alike, against the giants. The legendary hammer of Thor, Mjolnir, was not just a weapon of mass destruction, but also a symbol of hope and justice for both gods and mortals. Its power was so great that even the giants, who were known for their immense strength and ferocity, feared the wrath of Thor when he swung Mjolnir. The mere sight of the hammer was enough to make them tremble in their boots. Why were the giants so afraid of Mjolnir? Well, it wasn't just because of its size and sharpness. It was because the hammer represented everything they hated about the gods. It stood for justice, fairness, and protection of the weak, something the giants despised. The giants were known for their destructive and violent behavior, often attacking the realm of the gods and causing chaos and destruction wherever they went. Thor and his mighty hammer were the first line of defense against these attacks, a bulwark that kept the giants at bay. Whenever the giants got too close for comfort, Thor would raise Mjolnir and let loose a thunderous roar that shook the very foundations of the 9 realms. The giants would scatter like mice before a cat, knowing that they were no match for the god of thunder. Mjolnir was also a symbol of hope for mortals who lived in constant fear of the giants. They knew that if the giants ever broke through the gods' defenses, they would be next on the chopping block. But as long as Thor and Mjolnir stood against the giants, they knew they were safe. In many ways, Mjolnir was more than just a weapon. It was a beacon of light in a dark and dangerous world. In the end, Mjolnir was not just a hammer. It was the will of Asgard itself, an embodiment of its power and majesty. The stories of Thor and his mighty weapon continue to inspire awe and wonder in those who hear them. And Mjolnir will forever be remembered as one of the most powerful and iconic weapons in Norse mythology. But what do you think? Did you know about Mjolnir before watching this video? What's your favorite fact about Thor's legendary hammer? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more epic tales and historical adventures. We've got plenty more where this came from. Thanks for joining us on this journey through time and legend. And until next time, stay curious, stay adventurous, and always remember to stay in the moment. Norse paganism was a complex web of beliefs that has fascinated historians and enthusiasts for centuries. While we often associate Norse mythology with iconic figures like Odin, Thor, and Loki, there are many lesser-known deities whose stories have been overshadowed by their more famous counterparts. Some of these gods were intentionally erased from the sagas, perhaps seen as too barbaric or heretical by Christian scribes. Others may have simply fallen out of favor as the religious landscape shifted. But their absence from the traditional narratives doesn't mean they've vanished entirely. Welcome back to my channel, where today we'll be exploring the realm of Norse mythology and discussing 5 forgotten gods the sagas tried to erase. Norse mythology is a rich tapestry of gods, goddesses, giants, and monsters. It tells tales of courage, betrayal, love, and loss, all set against a backdrop of a world that's both familiar and fantastical. Yet despite its enduring legacy, there are aspects of this ancient religion that many people today know little or nothing about. In recent years, scholars have made significant strides in uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden symbols embedded in Norse culture and belief systems. By delving into the overlooked myths and legends, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of this fascinating period in human history. From the enigmatic figure of Odin to the fierce warrior goddesses like Freya and Skadi, Norse mythology offers a window into a world where the boundaries between good and evil, life and death, heaven and hell were often blurred. These stories not only provide insights into the beliefs and values of those who lived in the Viking Age, but also timeless lessons about the human condition that continue to resonate with us today. So let's begin our countdown at number 5 with Forseti, the Silent Judge. Forseti, also known as the White God, holds a significant place in Norse mythology. As the son of Odin and the god of law and order, he was revered as a bringer of justice and a protector of travelers. The Eddas, which are collections of Old Norse poems that preserve much of Norse mythology, provide glimpses into the reverence he commanded. In particular, the Poetic Edda, also known as the Elder Edda, includes an entire poem dedicated to Forseti, titled Hinskifta, or Praise of Forseti. This poem emphasizes his role as a dispenser of justice, highlighting his ability to bring about swift retribution for those who break the law or mistreat others. His wisdom and impartiality were celebrated, and it was believed that he presided over legal proceedings to ensure fairness and balance. Forseti was also associated with the concept of hospitality, reflecting the importance of welcoming strangers and treating them with kindness. He was invoked by travelers seeking safe passage and protection, and his blessings were sought upon their arrival at a new location. However, despite his prominence in Norse mythology, very little is known about Forseti outside of these references. The exact nature of his powers and domains remains somewhat mysterious, and there are no surviving accounts of his deeds or adventures. This lack of information has led to much speculation and debate among scholars and enthusiasts alike, who have attempted to piece together the fragmented bits of information to create a more complete picture of this enigmatic deity. Despite the gaps in our knowledge, Forsyth's enduring presence in Norse mythology and the reverence he commands in the Eddic poems serve as a testament to his significance in the Viking world. He remains an important symbol of justice, order, and the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. Moving forward in our countdown, let's discuss Vithar, the Silent Avenger, at number 4. Very little is known about Vidar, son of Odin, beyond what is mentioned in a few cryptic passages in the Eddas. One of the most intriguing references to Vidar is found in the Prose Edda, where Snorri Sturluson, the 13th century Icelandic politician and writer, describes him as the god who avenges the death of his father, Odin. According to Snorri, when the great serpent Jormungandr, also known as the Midgard serpent, reared its head and unleashed poisonous breath, Odin's sons, including Vithar, each took responsibility for avenging their father's death. This passage suggests that Vithar was destined to play a significant role in the aftermath of Ragnarok, the apocalyptic battle that concludes the Norse mythological cycle. Another mention of Vithar can be found in the Poetic Edda, specifically in a poem called Vulusp Ahinskifta, or Prophecy of the High One. Here he is described as one of the gods who will survive Ragnarok and usher in a new age of peace and prosperity. Despite these tantalizing hints, the Eddas offer few other details about Vithar's identity or attributes. His name, Vithar, is believed to derive from an Old Norse word meaning silent or wanting, and this epithet has led to speculation that he was associated with silence or secrecy. Some scholars have also noted similarities between Vithar and another figure in Norse mythology, the god Heimdall, who was also said to be responsible for avenging Odin's death. However, the true nature and extent of any connection between these two deities remain uncertain. Nevertheless, what little information we have about Vithar paints a picture of a powerful and enigmatic god, one whose role in the Norse pantheon is shrouded in mystery and anticipation. Next up at number 3, we have Hodr, the blind god of darkness. Hodr is a fascinating and tragic figure in Norse mythology, best known for his unwitting role in the death of his brother, Baldur, the god of light and joy. Accounts of Hoth's origins and early life are scarce, and much of what we know comes from the Eddas, particularly the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson. According to these sources, Hoth was the son of Odin and the half-brother of Baldur. From a young age, he exhibited unusual characteristics, notably his inability to distinguish between light and darkness, suggesting a connection to the realm of shadows and mysteries. This blindness extended not only to the physical realm, but also to the spiritual and emotional aspects of existence. Hoth's perception of the world was limited, and he lacked the ability to comprehend the true nature of his surroundings and relationships. Despite his challenges, Hoth played a significant role in Norse mythology. His association with darkness and blindness set him apart from the other gods, creating a sense of unease and foreboding around his character. This ambiguity surrounding his nature contributed to the tragic events that unfolded during Baldur's death. Mistakenly believing that he was doing his brother a favor, Hoth made Baldur's funeral pyre, unaware that this action would lead to his brother's untimely demise. Filled with remorse and grief, Hoth immediately regretted his actions. In the aftermath of Baldur's death, Hoth became a symbol of sorrow and regret. The Norse people viewed his story as a cautionary tale, reminding them of the importance of wisdom, foresight, and the potential consequences of ignorance and haste. The tragedy of Hoth and Baldur's relationship serves as a reminder of the complexities of family dynamics and the profound impact of loss and guilt. Coming back to the list at number 2, we have Bragi, the Skald of the gods. Bragi was a prominent figure in Norse mythology, celebrated for his skill as a skald, a poet and musician who composed heroic songs and recited them at gatherings of gods and mortals alike. In the Poetic Edda, Bragi is frequently mentioned in contexts related to poetry, music, and the art of storytelling. One of the most well-known references to Bragi can be found in the poem Skaldship at Thing, where he is praised for his mastery of poetic composition and his ability to captivate audiences with his tales of valor and adventure. This poem, along with others in the Eddas, highlights the importance of skalds in Norse culture, not just as entertainers, but as keepers of history and tradition. Bragi was also associated with wisdom and eloquence, and he was often called upon to settle disputes or mediate conflicts among the gods. His skills as a speaker and his deep understanding of human nature allowed him to find common ground and forge compromises, bringing about peaceful resolutions. Additionally, Bragi was believed to possess knowledge of magic and divination, and he was consulted on matters of great import to the gods and humans alike. His ability to tap into the hidden forces of the universe gave him insight into matters that were otherwise beyond the ken of mortals. Despite his numerous accomplishments and contributions to Norse mythology, relatively little is known about Bragi's origins and personal life. The Eddas provide scant details about his parentage, siblings, or other personal circumstances. This lack of information has left much of Bragi's story shrouded in mystery, and scholars have had to rely on fragments of poetry and folklore to piece together a coherent picture of this enigmatic deity. Last but not least, at number 1, we have Ul, the vanished god of the hunt. Ul, often referred to as Ul the Vanisher, is a fascinating yet somewhat enigmatic figure in Norse mythology. Despite his significant role as the god of winter, hunting, skiing, and archery, he remains a relatively obscure deity with few surviving accounts of his deeds and origins. Most of what we know about Ul comes from archaeological evidence and scattered references in Old Norse texts. One of the most compelling pieces of information about Ul is his association with the goddess Sif, the wife of Thor, and a prominent figure in Norse mythology. Some sources claim that Ul was either Sif's first husband or her lover before she wed Thor, further cementing his status as an important deity. Ul was also closely linked to the natural world, particularly the forests and mountains where animals roamed freely. He was seen as a protector of the balance of nature and was invoked for assistance in hunting and fishing. In addition to his prowess as a hunter and marksman, Ul was also credited with inventing skiing and archery. He was considered a master archer, and his arrows were said to fly with unerring accuracy, while his skis allowed him to traverse snow-covered landscapes with ease and grace. Despite his importance in Norse mythology, Ul's story is marked by tragedy. According to some accounts, he met his demise in a hunting accident, perhaps shot by his own arrow or killed in a skirmish with a wild animal. This unfortunate fate contributes to the somber undertones of Norse mythology, highlighting the fragility of life and the capricious nature of fate. And that brings us to the end of our journey through 5 forgotten Norse gods the sagas tried to erase. These deities, though often overlooked or misunderstood, played significant roles in Norse mythology and the beliefs of the Viking people. From the stoic wisdom of Forseti to the tragic fate of Ul, each god offers a unique glimpse into the rich tapestry of Norse culture and belief systems. Norse mythology continues to fascinate and inspire awe in modern audiences. These stories, though rooted in a distant past, resonate with timeless themes of courage, sacrifice, love, and loss. By exploring the lesser-known aspects of Norse mythology, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexity and depth of this ancient tradition and the enduring impact it has had on literature, art, and popular culture. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the realms of Norse mythology. If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to show your support by giving it a like and sharing it with others who might find interest in these forgotten gods. Your engagement helps us continue to bring fascinating content on Norse mythology and other captivating topics. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on new videos. We look forward to journeying with you again soon.